Okay, good evening members. Welcome to our meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. Thank you for coming along this evening. My name is John Whitehouse, I'm the Chair. I will just read out the webcasting announcement once I've got there. Yeah, so just to remind people that this is a webcast meeting. It will be uploaded to the internet and capable of repeated viewing. So by taking part, you're consenting to being filmed and the use of the images and recordings. If any of you really don't want to have your image captured, you have to go upstairs and watch. But I don't think that applies to anyone here. And if you could please turn your microphones on and off. On before speaking and off afterwards, that would be great. Can I just welcome Nicola Sayers, who I think it's your first meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee.
Thank you. I've been to one before, but
Sorry.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Morris as well. It's good to see you. Good to see you here. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Apologies have been received from Councillor Sunger and Councillor Hadley.
Okay. And while we're on membership, just to say that three of us spent, plus Owen and Sarah, spent time interviewing potential new independent members for the committee. And I think we're confident we'll be able to make an appointment for our next meeting on the 17th of November. So it'll be up to full strength. But thanks very much to Stephen and Cecile for giving up their afternoons to do that. Are there any declarations of interest? Nope. So we can move on to the minutes, starting on page 5. Are people happy to agree those as an accurate record? Okay, thank you very much. Are there any matters arising from the minutes that members wanted to follow up or ask about? No, I think pretty much everything comes up on the agenda. So we move on to the work programme on page 10. Sarah, do you want to take us through that or highlight anything?
So this sets out the reports that you can expect throughout the year. It doesn't stop you having any additional reports that you may want.
Okay, obviously next meeting looks like would be one of our busier ones. But yeah, as we go through the agenda, if you feel there's something that we need to sort of dive deeper into or we need more detail at a future meeting, you've got the opportunity to raise that and ask about that. So let's move on to the draft statement of accounts, which you had a PDF link to. Owen, did you want to?
Thank you. We just update the committee. So last time we met, the statement of accounts were about to be published. It's just before the statutory deadline. So they were published in time. They can be found on the website, and there's a link in the report. Just to remind members, and I'll come on to that again in the next agenda item, the backstop date for external audit this year is the 27th of February. The main audit hasn't started yet. It's expected to start in October, and it'll run through to the end of November to be completed by Christmas. And then the accounts will be brought to this committee for approval with a training session for members as a refresher of how to navigate through the accounts.
Okay, thanks for that. Obviously, there's a lot in the accounts and the notes, and I think it's sort of good to note that, you know, the introduction, it's not just about the finances, but it picks up some of the issues that we've talked about in terms of risk management and mitigations, and there's a bit in there about performance indicators and so forth as well. So it's not purely the financial details. Lots in the notes about reserves and things also. Obviously, we'll consider the final version in due course, but are there any questions or comments people had at this stage? Councillor Owen.
Yeah, just a question. I think I know the answer, but just to clarify, are we now up to date on the accounts? Because I know for many years we were sort of behind catching up, and then we had a huge sort of, I think there were 2 or 3 in one go that sort of caught us up. So does this mean this one will now be back on track and we expect it to be back on track going forward?
Yes, last year there was a big catch-up with the audits, and you'll remember there's been a national issue with audit capacity and getting accounts signed off. So last year, the accounts had a disclaimed opinion, but this year the 425 accounts have been signed off by February, and those backstop dates for the audits are coming forward each year over the next 3 years. So there's a slow process of catching up, but obviously it's a lot more on target than it has been in the past. So that's really pleasing that we're getting to that better stage.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously good news that, you know, these were up on the website and available for the public to see pretty soon after the end of the financial year. The issue we've got is that if auditors on one set of accounts can't absolutely assure themselves on the closing balance, that then has a knock-on effect to future accounts. Yeah.
So just to build on that, so the audit will complete. It will be a full audit this year, but we'll still get a disclaimed opinion, really for what the Chair was saying, because it will take a number of years to build up reliance on those opening balances. So the auditors will go through a process over a number of years before they can place full reliance and give an unqualified opinion. So again, across the country, there will be disclaimed opinions over the next few years for accounts as that process develops.
Okay, is that it on the statement of accounts? So just note the current position and then we'll come to approve it in due course, we hope. Right, so the next report is Treasury Management, and again, Mr. Sparks. Oh, sorry, no, next report is External Audit Update, but still, it is still you.
Debbie Hanson for me, I couldn't attend tonight, but she's given me an update note just to convey to the committee. So as I said, the audit is due to start on 6th of October and it will run through to the end of November. You're also looking to do some sample selection for key areas in advance of this when working papers have been provided and the high-level review of these has been undertaken. So what they'll do is do some sample testing before they come on site, just to really get ahead of the game. There's an accounts workshop which is on the 18th of September, and there the auditors will go through with my team the project plan and the working paper requirements just to make sure that they're completely comfortable. The auditors done an initial review of the accounts and they've got some early queries, some cost and consistency questions that they'll send back to us this week, which is normal practice from their initial review. At the moment, we supplied 40% initial working papers and we're going to get the rest of them to them by the 19th of September. So that's when they want the pack complete. They've selected some asset samples and they're going to share those again with my team, and that's to look at valuations. The auditors get their own specialist valuers to check our valuations. That's part of the normal process. That will be undertaken. They're also meeting with our previous auditor, Deloitte, just to confirm the 22-23 position of working papers. And again, that's normal practice when we have a change of auditor. An issue we sort of touched on last time, they're working through a new issue that's arisen, is whether they can place reliance on the component auditors. And by that, I mean the auditors who have audited our subsidiary accounts. So that is arising where the accounts and the audit has been done by the same firm, and they may need to do some further testing on those balances to make sure they're comfortable with that, they can rely on it, but they're going through their internal processes to confirm that, and that's the update from the external auditor.
Okay, thanks very much. As it picks up on things that Ernst & Young told us when they came along to our last meeting, were there any more questions or clarification that anyone needs? Otherwise, when are they next due to come? That'll be after they've done this work, presumably.
I think they'll come to the next meeting, right, which is, I think that's November. And again, it might be whether the accounts audit is finished then or not, so I'll probably come to one afterwards as well.
We'll get a sense of how progress is going.
How it's progressing, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. So we can move on to the Treasury Management report. Not at all.
So this is one of the routine reports we bring to the committee on a quarterly basis. So the report provides an overview of the Council's treasury management activities for the final quarter, so the year-end position for 24-25, and that's in line with SITFA's Code of Practice and Statutory Guidance. So in terms of economic outlook and the market context, so in quarter 4, again, this is quite historic now, CPI stood at 2.6% in March, slightly down from 2.8% the previous month, but obviously that's well above the Bank of England's 2% target, and things obviously moved a little bit since then. Interest rates were reduced 4.5% in February, and the average for the year was 4.94%. And gilt rates, the 10-year gilt rate rose from 3.94% to 4.69%, and the 20-year gilt rates rose from 4.4 to 5.22. That's obviously important because that's what our borrowing costs are as a council are based on gilt rates. External borrowing increased ever so slightly from 253.1 million to 253.2 million during the year. There's a reduction in short-term investments of 19 million down to 0, and that's where we've been using internal borrowing rather than borrowing from PWLB to reduce interest costs. And we had £13.5 million of cash and cash equivalents to maintain our liquidity at the year end. So there's been full compliance with the SITFA Code and Treasury Management Strategy, and also some indicators that are included within the report. So the investment limits in all sectors were met, the debt limit, and that's the operational and the authorised boundary, so that's how much we expect to borrow. We set those limits as part of the capital strategy they would adhere to. And our liquidity, which is the amount of cash we have at any point in time, again, that target was also met. So the report recommends the committee notes Treasury Management quarter update and confirms continued compliance with statutory and strategic requirements.
Okay, thanks for that. We've got the quarter 1 report in a minute, so I said if people got specific questions on quarter 4, they ask them now. Otherwise, we'll take the quarter 1 report and then people can ask overall questions. And, yeah.
I just had a question about the treasury management. So you've run down the short-term investments in cash. What's the logic behind that? I mean, 30.4 is the movement, or negative 30.4. So there's, obviously we're tending to run down our cash balances. Just an idea about what the logic behind doing that is.
So the way we manage our overall treasury strategy is, again, a bit like in normal everyday life. It's cheaper for us to, or borrowing is more expensive than the interest you get paid from investments. So to limit the overall interest cost, you basically use up your own cash before you borrow, because you lose less interest than you would incur if you borrowed.
Yeah, okay. But is there a floor beyond which you... I mean, there are kind of, obviously you want to retain some short-term cash, don't you? Because that's sort of essential for the operation of the council.
So one of the indicators we have is to keep £15 million in cash and cash equivalents. And again, that is to make sure that we can meet salary bill, pay contractors, and that's how we manage that. Obviously we're a going concern and we've got cash to meet our liabilities so full due. But we treat that cash and cash equivalents separate to investments because it's cash that's readily available. It's not tied up at all.
Just sort of following up on that, as to how these sort of cash management stuff reads across to the budget side of things. Obviously, when you've got big cash balances, you have interest, which can support the revenue budget, but you're also paying out the interest on any borrowing you've done, but that might be capital, for example, not revenue. So is there an internal adjustments to allow for that, or do we just accept that if we use the cash for internal borrowing, we no longer get the interest and the revenue budget has to find the difference somewhere?
So the way it works, we have a treasury model that forecasts basically our expenditure, particularly focused on the capital programme. It looks obviously our opening cash position, when amounts fall due, and that includes when we think things like payroll, when big expenditure items happen, and then we look at when we're going to need to borrow, looking at what debt we've already got outstanding, and then we forecast what our borrowing costs will be. It's obviously quite difficult and things move, but again, we estimate what we think the interest rates will be. And the other side of that is the minimum revenue provision as well, and that's another part of that capital financing dynamic we do. And that's quite important because if we don't borrow, we don't have to charge minimum revenue provision until we borrow as well. So that's another benefit from using those internal balances at the same time.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm thinking about is that the revenue budget has been supported by having interest income, which presumably comes to an end if there aren't balances, unless there's some sort of internal mechanism to recognise that we're effectively borrowing from ourselves.
Yeah, there is. So as part of the overall cash model, we recognise we're borrowing from ourselves. So as you say, we've lost that benefit of the cash investments, but we've gained the benefit of not borrowing, and the two of those get taken into account.
And the benefit is accounted for?
Yeah, to set the budget.
Yes, yeah. Okay, no, that's helpful. Okay, anything else on quarter four? Yeah, Councillor Owen.
Just on that point, our borrowing didn't actually go down though, right? It stayed flat. So we didn't get the benefit of cheaper borrowing.
Yeah, so the way the borrowing works, we also we profile our borrowing. So we can borrow basically from anything between 1 year and 50 years. So what we do is we make sure we haven't got too much borrowing mature at any point in time, because that would expose us to a big chunk of refinancing risk at any point in time. So we phase our borrowing over that period. As you say, normally we refinance debt, but we may have some cash and not need to refinance it, and that's all part of that capital strategy, that big cash flow planning.
Okay, if there's no more questions on quarter four, we'll move on to the more recent quarter one.
Oh, it's me again. Here we go. So again, this report is very similar. It just obviously moves the position on a quarter. Again, it's in line with Sector Code of Practice and statutory guidance to bring these reports to you on a quarterly basis. So slightly more up-to-date economic and market context is included in the report. So CPI was 3.4% at the end of the quarter, obviously gone up again, but still significantly above the Bank of England target. Interest rates reduced to 4.25% with no change in June. And Ireland close, our Treasury advisors are still forecasting that interest rates will come down at the end of the year to about 3.75%. But as we know, things change. The 10-year gilt rates have fallen slightly, and so have the 20-year, but again, not significantly. They are stubbornly high, unfortunately. And again, as sort of alluded to in the previous quarter, we have needed to borrow. So we've borrowed £12.8 million this quarter. So the debt's gone up from 253 million to 266 million. And again, following on from the quarter four, we've got no short-term investments, but we've got £14.8 million of cash and cash equivalents, which again is maintaining that liquidity position, as we were just discussing. And again, the capital and treasury indicators have all been complied with, and there's details in the report of those, if members want to discuss those in more detail.
Okay, anything people want to raise from the Councillor Morris?
Thanks. Just one more point on that. So we're running down our cash in lieu of borrowing, whatever market rates we borrow at. Presumably at some point you built into the forecast the fact that borrowing will need to recommence as your cash reserves reduce. Do you know what that looks like? I mean, is it going to be a steep increase in borrowing at some point? I mean, I know you're running down, and a lot of the cash presumably is what came from the North Weald Airfield sale, land sale. So that has a limited resource. That was a limited resource. So the impact on future borrowing will be what once you've run that down?
Yeah, so it basically means as you have no internal short-term investments, as the capital spend increases, notwithstanding general liquidity movements, we'll need to borrow over this year and probably next year. So it's really borrowing from most of the capital programme going forward will need to be borrowed for, and that has been budgeted as part of that capital financing strategy that's included in the MTFS.
Okay. Councillor Owen?
I mean, the point was kind of covered there, but yeah, we're getting back to this old habit of just borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, which I don't love. That aside, though, going on to the next quarter, we're embarking on big legal fees as well. Do we have an idea of what this quarter is going to look like and those legal fees are going to look like? Because I'm a bit worried there's been no communication about how much the council's spending on this.
That's probably outside of the remit of the committee. We have, again, we have an estimate of what legal fees will be. It's probably can't really say in this committee, and we have a funding source for those identified.
Yeah, I would just agree with that. It's outside of the remit of this committee.
It's something you can pursue outside the meeting. Just following up the point about borrowing, I mean, I meant to check the capital strategy before I came here and didn't get there. But obviously, we've got some big projects completing in the current year, Epping Sports Centre being the sort of biggest example. But then in subsequent years, we see the capital finance requirement stepping up significantly. I mean, off the top of your head, can you remember what's driving that increase?
Again, remember the capital finance requirement also links to the HRA as well.
Yeah.
So we've got HRA new build programme, some capital expenditure in the HRA. So there's an assumption some of the borrowing from the HRA is met from revenue resources, some is done from borrowing. And you'll remember from when we do the budget, we do a 30-year plan for the HRA to make sure it's sustainable. So a chunk of that will be from the HRA. There are some sort of minor capital projects, things like IT going forward that are in the capital programme, but we haven't got new significant projects coming forward. So we've got some outstanding works for Qualis that are going forward at profile for this year. We've got the HRA, and as you say, we've got new leisure centre come to an end, the air control tower coming to an end. So those key projects are coming to an end this year. So at the moment, there isn't big significant projects going forward into future years.
Yeah, and the HRA borrowing we'd expect to be supported from the council house rents and the rents of other properties within the HRA.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, anything else on treasury management and borrowing? Yeah.
Just wanted to deep dive briefly on page 33 on commercial property investments. There's a reference there to kind of advance warning, I guess, of potential write-offs. Could you expand on that a little bit and your, thoughts around potential kind of, extent of nervousness of, the likelihood of write-offs happening and what the potential extent of that might be?
So at the moment, we're not significantly concerned there's material write-offs. What that's reflecting is when invoices are raised, that counts towards that figure in income coming in. Obviously, some of that will not be collectible. We don't think that's significant. And obviously, what we do that annual review of any outstanding debts for part of the bad debt provision as well. So a lot of that will be accounted for if there's risk associated with it, but we haven't got significant issues that we're concerned about.
And so on that topic, the Over and Scrutiny Committee received performance management reports on debt collection and commercial performance and so forth. So I'm not sure if anyone here is on the Scrutiny Committee, but anyone watching the Scrutiny Committee, by all means, pick that issue up there. Right. Well, if that's done on Treasury Management, we can move on to the next report, which is our Internal Audit Monitoring Report. Who's going to take this? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take you through the first part of this report and then hand over to Sarah for the second part. So if we could save the questions to the end, please. So the contracts and contract management final report has been issued and given reasonable assurance This audit focused on contracts up to 150,000, which are usually procured within the services. The audit found areas of good practice, but did identify that there's not always an awareness of officers to consider the total value of contracts over 4 years, and therefore not following the correct procurement route. They're also not always aware of when contracts are expiring. So it's been agreed that the procurement and contracts team will monitor supplier spend over 25,000 to highlight where contracts should be in place, and to monitor the contract register to look for contracts which are due to expire, and then report these quarterly to senior leadership team. They also found that some contract management guidance would be beneficial, particularly where officers have inherited contracts through staff changes and things like that, and also some procurement rules training to be provided. Moving on to the recommendation tracker. So the current tracker, Appendix 2, we've got 2 medium priority recommendations that are still on there. We've introduced a more robust process now for these, where they go overdue, more frequent meetings with the responsible service managers, and escalation through the senior leadership team. Paragraph 5 highlights some of the other internal audit activities, and 6 and 7 give you an update on the corporate fraud team.
Thank you, Sue. Moving on to the rest of the report. So item 8 is about the internal audit charter and mandate. So this has to be formally approved by the committee. It's a really important document. It sets out the position of internal audit. It sets out explicitly about our independence, which is something I really fiercely want to keep hold of. So although I report informally to Owen, my main bosses are you as the audit committee. So the charter covers all 4 councils in the shared service. As a reminder, that's Harlow, Epping, Broxbourne and St Albans. And if you remember last year's, it's completely different because we've brought in the they brought in the global internal audit standards, so this follows the template that they suggest. Moving on then to item 9, it's the review of the Code of Corporate Governance. This document you don't have to have. You have to have your annual governance statement, but you don't have to have this code. But it fits in nicely with our annual governance statement. It sets out what our governance framework looks like and how we can evidence that. We've done our annual review of it as a council, and there are no changes proposed. Lastly, I come on to the skills and knowledge review, item 11 there. So we got the majority of members to complete that. And it's good to show that it still confirms that we have a wide range of skills and expertise within the audit committee, and there's no one particular area that we need to fill a gap with. We could have an ad hoc person or have briefings or something like that. Part of the questionnaire is about where additional training would be nice, and it was around the interpretation of the statement of accounts, which Owen's going to and his team's going to be doing sometime this year. Some more stuff around governance and decision-making processes, and other issues like that, and we'll build that into our training and briefing programme. The last part of the report is around the annual governance statement. So that came to you earlier in the year. We had a little action plan in there, and this sets out who owns that action and what action's been taken to date. And you can see that the majority of those are now in progress, and we should be on target to complete that action plan by the end of the year. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that. You've got about 4 reports for the price of 1 in that little presentation. So, does anyone want to start off? Councillor Owen.
Yeah, there's a bit in here about AI, which I think everyone's talking about these days. But is the council using much AI? What's the plan around this? How are people sort of thinking about it?
So the council's in the process of putting together an AI policy, and there'll be training then for officers, generally just to maximise the use of it. At the moment, that is anticipated to focus on some tools like Copilot that are part of the Microsoft suite, how to get the best use of those and give people that digital confidence to maximise it. But bearing in mind, we need to be mindful of the safeguards as well around data security and making sure it's thoroughly checked before it is used. So early stages, that's what we're looking at. But also where we have normal systems, and these days as systems come out, they tend to have AI tools built into them, although we may not recognise them. Again, so it's making sure we maximise the use of some of those abilities in normal systems to make sure we're using to their fullest.
Can I follow? Do you want to come? No. Follow up on that. You'd say sort of maximise use sort of without qualification, but there's quite a difference, isn't there, between using AI to, I don't know, polish an email or something, and using AI to actually make decisions on, I don't know, benefits eligibility or whether something meets planning policy or whatever you might apply it to. Can you sort of say a bit more about where AI is being applied and how any issues are being managed? Not in detail, and I don't want to preempt the general steer. I think at the moment we're not using AI for assessments and criteria evaluation. It is more about streamlining administration tasks, helping gather information, but we're not using it as a sort of a fundamental processing tool. And again, we'll look at that over the medium term, but also mindful of LGR and what we invest in and how we'll need to work with other authorities. So again, as we get a better idea of the outcome, how that's going to focus, there'll be more sort of partnership working around how the public sector and councils can best use that, and we can take advantage of best practice and partners and like. Okay, no, thanks for that. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could just go back to the work of internal audit, I had 3 questions on the reports. The first one is on the contracts management audit. Just to clarify my understanding, from what you said and from what I was reading, it sounds as if even after recommendations have been implemented, it's still a very manual process with high risk of errors. Is my understanding correct that there's no kind of way of looking at, here's vendor A, this is the spend on this contract? It is still up to each individual to go and kind of seek that information out and piece it together?
Yes, you're quite right. It's still a manual process. We're very reliant on a spreadsheet. We've got the data, we're just not using it to our best advantage. So that's what this hopefully will ensure. So you're happy that the recommendations, once implemented, will tackle that?
The other question was around the overdue high priority item, which is a topic I keep banging on about, I feel, every meeting. I just wanted to explore this one in particular. Obviously, there's a few that are high priority that are overdue. I noticed one that is coming up to 12 months over. Could you expand on that a little bit and whether you're comfortable that that's close to completion or where are we at with that?
Okay, is that the cyber security one? We've just got 2 overdue.
Yeah, in my deck on page 40, there is listed 4, but later in the deck I could only find details on 2, so I'm not sure if it's maybe just a numbering thing or if I'm missing something completely.
Sorry, you're looking at the table on page 40?
Yeah.
Table 1.
Yes, table 1.
Table 1, which says that it's 2 medium overdue.
So I've got high priority past its due date.
0. September 25.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I'm with you. I thought these were the due dates of the item.
Oh,
so,
no,
yeah, no,
this is
thank
the
you for
update as
clarifying.
of... Sorry, yeah.
No, that's a much better position, so I'm glad I read that wrong. That's great. And just my final question, which I think is for you, again, Sarah, on the charter. There's a reference to the committee meeting with yourself without the executive team. Is that ad hoc and we request it, or is there a certain cycle to that?
So we've built into the sort of training program to meet me at least once a year. So that's down for March time, and I'm going to explain how I do my internal audit plan, and then if we've got any executive officers in the room with us, we'll just kick them out and then we can have a chat about things. But it doesn't stop any of the audit committee wanting to talk to me. We have our pre-meetings as well, so it should be a two-way communication, and it's open and free as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, Councillor Morris.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I just had a point on the use of AI in the council. So, I mean, we sort of mentioned things like, creating emails and things, but I think without being absolutely sure about the security implications, we should not be pasting any kind of confidential information into AI boxes at all, because that information can be used to improve the AI knowledge base. So you may be inadvertently putting confidential information into the public sphere. So I think that's one point that needs to be borne in mind. I had a second question about the knowledge and skills. So the colour that says I'm aware and have some understanding, I noticed the two things that I'd have that, a question 4, awareness of global internal audit standards, and 5, awareness of financial statements. I mean, I wondered if there was any comment on whether that was felt to be appropriate for the audit committee or not.
So the skills and knowledge analysis is to try and figure out if we do have any gaps or things like that. So if somebody has a particular expertise, that would be really useful to know, and then we can exploit that. So the level that we've got, we didn't have any particular areas where we had no or little knowledge. So I was comfortable with the results that we got.
Okay, did you want to come back to the AI?
And again, just to reassure members, I don't want to preempt things, but the Data Protection Officer is intrinsically linked with the development of everything we do with AI, so that is obviously topmost of our list, so be reassured.
I mean, certainly I think when you're using the paid-for solutions, you can opt out of having the data used externally. It did strike me when it's sort of big spreadsheets and AI, there's a potential link there in terms of pulling out insights and information. It'd be interesting to see if anything comes of that. I do think, having clarified the number of outstanding audit actions, we need to note that is the lowest number of outstanding actions for at least a couple of years, possibly sometime longer. So, thank you to those who've been chasing for that to happen, and thank you to those who've responded positively to being chased. Do you think we'll get down to 0? Okay, no, thank you for that. The procurement thing, it does seem to have been sort of an issue on the agenda for a long time, with very similar issues being talked about for a long time. I mean, I noticed a review of the procurement rules being undertaken. I thought we just finished a review of the procurement rules, or is this a sort of permanent revolution type thing?
It's something that you need to keep up to date all the time, and we had the new procurement rules coming in, so we were keeping an eye on, and then they came in, and so we were refreshing them, and just making sure that we're on top of everything as more guidance comes out.
Okay, I mean, the point I think we've made before is the importance of officers understanding what the rules are, and obviously every time they change, there's a new training need, isn't there, to bring people up to date. Okay, so anything else? So yes.
Just to add to that, myself and Barbara Beardwell, the monitoring officer, are actually looking at
the procurement rules, and we'll be moving that forward as soon as we can.
Okay, no, thanks for that. I suppose also it's balancing the complexity to cover every situation with the actually being able to operate in everyday circumstances. Right, if there's no more questions on any of these items or comments people want to make, we've got the recommendations on page 38. So we've noted the summary of the work of internal audit. Are we happy to approve the revised internal audit charter? Looks like nodding to me. Yep, I'll take that as agreement. Approve the updated code of corporate governance. And then later in the year, we'll want to know how well we're doing in living up to those standards before we sign off the accounts and things, won't we? We've noted the skills and knowledge analysis, so do look out for the training. You know, I'm sure, Councillor Morris, if you wanted to come to any of that training, we'd be happy for you to join the audit committee members for that. The more people who can read statement of accounts, the better. And we've noted the progress of the actions in the annual governance statement. Okay, thank you. So we move on to our next report. So this is the risk management report, aspects of which we've touched on. Mr. Sparks.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is one of the regular items on risk management. We have reviewed through officers, senior digital team and the corporate governance group the current corporate risks. There's one significant change, so the scoring on the existing risks has not changed. We've added a new risk on community cohesion. It's been added to the register. Obviously, this is an ongoing issue, and obviously it's got heightened tensions due to the issues around the Bell Hotel. But obviously, it has wider dimensions as well as just that particular item. That has been scored as a 16, which is really a red risk. Obviously, this was done a while ago, and the issue is constantly evolving, so we need to keep a careful eye and keep monitoring it. A community cohesion group has been set up involving key partners such as health, education, voluntary sector, community safety, and Essex County Council. And that's really looking at managing the current issues, but then looking longer term about how we support the community, really recovering from the current situation and on an ongoing basis. So it is early stage of this. At the moment, the group meets on a weekly basis, and it will be going forward. There'll be a longer term strategy about what we can do on an ongoing basis around longer term inclusion, things like meeting with schools, community groups, having that visible presence, just trying to develop that cohesion really across Essex. It will be widened out to the wider community as well. So that's really the main change and the risk that has really happened since we spoke about it last quarter.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So, members, do you want to pick up on how any of the existing risks or older risks are being dealt with, or the new risk added? Councillor Owen.
Yeah, obviously this last point was scored a 4. I know you said it was done a while ago. Should we score it a 5, given what's going on? Is one of my questions. And the second one would be maybe it could come back to audit at a later point, because it's early stages, there's obviously a lot going on. It'd be quite interesting to hear what we can or can't do with regards to this point. Thanks.
I think obviously what we will be doing will be constantly monitoring the situation as it changes. I think at the time I suppose it's subjective in a way. I think the effect is obviously quite significant, although it has been changing, and the likelihood, I suppose, is around I suppose peaceful protest versus some of the the more aggressive scenes we saw earlier on. So I suppose it's giving that ability to look at, I don't say this, but things could again destabilise from where they are at the moment. But I think definitely we'll review it on a quarterly basis. Obviously, officers are doing it on a daily basis, literally, just to try and manage the situation. But we'll definitely have it on the risk register for next quarter to review again and see what's happened since then.
Okay, no, thanks for that. I mean, I sort of come at this, I suppose, the hat as an Epping resident and councillor, as well as a member of this committee, and my first reaction to the further actions was it looked a bit sort of one-dimensional. I'm a bit reassured by what you were saying, which was suggesting a much wider range of activities and things were in place, and you mentioned public order, which isn't mentioned in here. But yeah, it's not something where just one or two actions are going to deal with the overall issues and the and the tensions which have boiled up or been stoked. Anything else on the risk register? I mean, ideally, of course, what we'd like to happen over time is to see the risk numbers go down as risks are not sort of mitigated but dealt with. But a lot of these things like demand from the homeless, are stuff which the council doesn't have complete control over. I suppose one risk which has been on there for sort of a long time, and when we first came on the agenda we were, well, this sounds a bit procedural to be a major risk, was the Consumer Standards and Social Housing Regulator risk. And now that regulator's been in place, and we should have a sort of better understanding of how they operate and what they do. And I wondered if that was a risk that's likely to change in future.
I think potentially it's probably something I can take back to housing colleagues, and they can really unpick it and have a deep dive into it. But as you say, the standards are now better known, better understood, so I'm sure we'll have a better view than we did have previously. So I can take that back to colleagues.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, all my queries on the community cohesion have been covered, but I wanted to, if it's okay, to move on to a couple of other risks. Also dive into cyber on page 74. There's quite a lot of, obviously still red after kind of current actions. There's quite a lot of further actions listed. To what extent are you comfortable that it will move away from red once those further actions have been implemented?
Again, not an expert on cybersecurity. I think, talking to colleagues, I think it's unlikely it will ever move away from red. I think it's an ongoing challenge as we put more security measures in place. Cybersecurity threats get ever more complex, so I think it will always be red. Hopefully we can do it to a situation where we're as comfortable as we can be. Obviously the action plan is there, but I'm sure as we do these there'll be other actions that will get added to the action plan as that general environment around cybersecurity changes. So I think we're comfortable we've got a plan in place to limit risk as much as we can, but I think it will always probably be on the risk register for the foreseeable future just because that landscape is forever changing.
Yeah, thank you. I understand the kind of the fast-moving nature of it. I guess I just wanted to express a little bit of concern about the, it's always going to stay red and the risk that then leads to, lack of action. But thank you. The other point I wanted to understand in a bit more detail is on page 78, the financial viability of Qualis. And I'm pretty sure this is outside the remit of the committee on the specifics, but I was interested to understand the monitoring and reporting and the governance around it. So who does that information go to, and what oversight body will see the modelling scenario results?
So there's a quarterly forecast of the Qualis financial position that goes to Cabinet, and the next quarter is going to the next Cabinet meeting. 22nd, is it?
The agenda went out today.
It's on that one. So we monitor the position on a quarterly basis, and what we are doing is having a review of that position, which will be feeding into the MTFS assumptions going forward. So that'll be part of that budget discussion, how we can manage that. But obviously Cabinet has an overview of the situation.
Councillor Owen.
Yeah, there was just one that I just saw actually. The climate change one actually. It's been a while since we've had an update on the interim air mitigation strategy. And then I noticed it says the air pollution mitigation strategy is under review. Do you know when we're expected to hear about this and what's been done? Any outcome from that?
I'm afraid I don't, unless colleagues have any further information. We'll find that out, we'll send a note out to members, so yeah.
Thank you for that. Councillor Morris.
Thanks, yeah. I had a couple of points. First on the follow-up to the two earlier questions on cyber security. I mean, these residual risk scores are based on the likelihood of something happening and its impact. So on cyber security, the impact is always going to be very high. So the way of tackling it is to reduce the likelihood. I'm not sure it's actually acceptable to have it at a very critical level like this. I mean, the impact is going to be extremely severe. And I think, you know, I know it's not this committee's work to do it, but I mean, I really think there should be a focus on bringing this down, this exposure down, because if something were to happen, it would be disastrous for the council. So that would be my first point. And the second one on Qualis. Okay, I've probably been asking questions about Qualis since I started, which was about a year and a half ago. And generally, the response to all comments about Qualis's financial viability is that it's going to be monitored and forecast. And I just wonder if there's going to be a point at which monitoring and forecast results in some kind of concrete action to manage the financial risk.
On cybersecurity, I completely appreciate what you're saying, and it is scary. And you know, you look at the likes of Marks and Spencer's, whose online went down, must have cost them many hundreds of millions of pounds. We've got a strategy in place. We've had an external review of it, which we do quite regularly. So we've got that action plan in place, so we're doing all we can to manage it. And I'd love to say we can be as comfortable as possible, but it will be an ongoing issue for us. But we're very mindful of what you're saying, definitely doing, we're trying all we can. On the Qualis perspective, I can assure members we are looking at the way forward, how we're going to manage that, but I can't really comment further at this time.
I mean, that's probably a question for Councillor Matthews at Cabinet, and he'd probably come, he'd probably point you at some things Qualis are not doing now that they were doing in the past, but it's not really my place to speak on that. And I mean, I think you're right to sort of flag up the undesirability of having red sort of flashing risks. On the other hand, it's partly the fact of them being red that sort of drives people to continually have them at the front of their minds and taking them seriously. And it is the very fact that it has a massive impact that makes it over on that side of the matrix. Stuff that's very likely to happen has a low impact, would never get into the red section to start with. Stuff that has a high likelihood of happening, but pretty much we're certain never will, wouldn't get into the red. But this is something we know has happened to other organisations, so we can't just be complacent and assume what will happen to us. And also, absolutely, as you said, if it happens, it's an issue. So I suppose what we might particularly want to look at is the difference between the residual score and the sort of initial score, and are we doing enough to bring that score down? Which, we must keep asking for ourselves. And both the Qualis and some of the other things we've talked about, they feed into the financial sustainability risk, and presumably you'll be kicking up off the budget process with a sort of scene-setting report in, October or something, will you? Okay. Right. Have members got anything they want to ask or further on that? We have to refer the risk register to Cabinet for approval, and I think there are 1 or 2 points in there that we'd want to draw to Cabinet's attention, and that is some of these risks that have been there on a long time. Has the context changed on the statutory regulator and the air pollution monitoring strategy, which Councillor Owen raised? On the cyber, I think it's worth us saying, we are concerned, but also it is right that it's at the front of mind of those dealing with risk in the council, and we back that being at the forefront of people's minds. And on the Qualis side of things, it's worth knowing that one of the things that came up in the skills and audit and the training was a wish to understand a bit more about the relationship between the council and its subsidiaries, and the governance and the financial arrangements and so forth. And also, there was an internal audit report, was it last year or the year before, on Qualis, an internal audit report on the forthcoming year coming up about the governance of TVS, as an assurance thing, not because a particular issue has been identified. So when that's ready, it may be an appropriate time to look at that in more detail. Did you want to add anything on that? Or no? Okay. Yeah.
In terms of referral to the logic group, I think Councillor Owen's point is also a very valid one about community cohesion and the rating. It is ongoing, and just looking at the definition of that, I also would concur that it should be a 5. So for commenting before agreeing to send it on, I would include that.
Okay, are members happy to send that comment as well? Okay, well, if we can do that, I believe that takes us to the end of the meeting. Yeah, there's no other business, is there?
No other business, Chairman.
Okay, and no reason to exclude the press or public. So thank you very much all for your time this evening. Hope to see you again on the 17th, and look out for details of training opportunities. Thanks very much, everyone.